And so some people have a harder time getting into stress, but most everybody has a line at which if some event happened, they are going to experience this, and it happens very fast. But to kind of constrain the discussion, just think of it as you have a domino of stress response, and you see something stressful, you should never expect yourself to not get stressed. You should expect yourself to learn how to de-stress faster and faster.
Hi, I'm Kyle Kittleson with MedCircle, and if you've ever wanted to cultivate more resilience, this is the video for you. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Christy Lamb, who has been on MedCircle many times, a psychiatrist out in Southern California. Dr. Lamb, wonderful to have you here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Kyle. It's always a pleasure.
And brand new to MedCircle, but I bet you've seen him around YouTube. He has the Huberman Lab podcast, and he's also a professor of neuroscience at Stanford University School of Medicine. We have Dr. Huberman. Welcome to MedCircle, Dr. Huberman.
Thanks so much for having me. Delighted to be here.
This is quite the duo I have the pleasure of speaking with, so I'm going to ask both of you this question. What is the difference between resilience and grit? Dr. Huberman, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, to be totally honest, there isn't a clear operational definition of resilience or grit, at least to my knowledge. When I say operational definition, we mean a term that everyone can agree on in scientific literature, which includes psychology and neuroscience, et cetera, that can be measured the same way in every laboratory. For instance, we have, or circumstance, we have operational definitions of blood pressure, of heart rate, for instance, but not of resilience and grit. However, I think there's general agreement that resilience and grit both correspond to some capacity to deal with things that are tricky or challenging in the external environment, okay, as well as being able to either adjust or manage oneself despite changes in one's internal environment. And in neuroscience, we have clear operational definitions of those two things. And the first one is exteroception, which is our perception of the outside world. So extero, it's seeing a red car drive by and noticing that it's your neighbor's car. That's exteroception. Noticing how quickly your heart is beating, by contrast, is interoception. So when we talk about grit and resilience, we are talking about an ability to tolerate external changes, and be in touch with those, to be in exteroceptive states and be in touch with what's going on around us, as well as being able to be in touch with our internal state, so-called interoception. And grit and resilience sort of speaks to the idea that one can manage one's internal state despite the external environment. And just to put one last sentence on this, because I want to hear what others have to say about this. When we say someone is gritty, that could come from two sources. It could be that their internal state doesn't fluctuate much when there's pressure on the outside. So we think of someone, for instance, who's very comfortable public speaking, can go up to the podium and they're cool, calm, and collected. Their internal state is steady despite the pressure of the situation. We could also imagine that someone is gritty or resilient because they get up to the podium, their heart rate is up tremendously. They are stressed as all can be, and yet their voice sounds steady and cool because they are able to manage some aspect of that interoceptive state. They either register, I'm really stressed, but I'm not going to show it, or they somehow can clamp that stress. But either way, I think that we can arrive at a pretty good definition by saying that the ability to be gritty or resilient has something to do with the ability to proceed in the external world, continue to go toward the person, the thing, the circumstance that is challenging you, despite a shift in your internal state or a concern that your internal state would suddenly be pulled off center by whatever's going on around you. So it has something to do with this relationship between internal and external world and ability to manage internal state.
That explanation really resonated with me. Dr. Lamb, what's your response?
Yeah, I'd agree completely. I think that with resilience, we're talking about almost a characterological way of being in the world, that we think of people who are resilient as people who have grit, who can operate in this way, who can get up on the stage, even when they're anxious, and perform. And that I would say that these terms often get used interchangeably, but that grit is only one part of someone who's resilient. Somebody who can just bear down and push through has grit. And in order to stay resilient in that state, they really need to also have a number of other factors that makes them be able to re-regulate, be able to come back down to normal state so that they can use that grit again. There aren't many people who can stay at that high grit level for a really long time of just pushing through. And so resilience, I think, incorporates grit as probably first and foremost, and then has these other subtle things of being able to notice oneself, that interoception piece, to be able to then say, okay, I've done this. Now I need to re-regulate, take care of myself, be able to have perspective on what's going on. So there are a number of different factors I think we'll probably get into that contribute to this as well.
Dr. Lamb, I want to talk in a bit about how all of this relates to stress when that comes up. But Dr. Huberman, I know I've actually listened to your podcast, and I am certainly not smart enough to get all of it because you are very intelligent and go through the nitty gritty details. But a lot of our viewers love that science evident that when you get into those details. So how does the brain work when it is perceiving these experiences of life and evoking that resilience or grit?
Yeah, I just want to give a nod to Dr. Lamb's description. I think that the idea that resilience is a feature of which grit is just one subset is really a powerful way to think about it. And I took a mental note that I'm going to come back to that. I think that's an excellent way of framing it, that grit and resilience and mental toughness can be verbs, nouns, or adjectives, is the thought that came to mind as Dr. Lamb presented that. So I think she is, since you're here, you bullseyed it. And there's a real kernel of genius in the way that you frame that. So I think that we should all come back to that at some point. Okay, so what's stress? Well, we're all familiar with it subjectively, but I think the most important thing to understand about the stress response is the following. First of all, we need to define the term. So we can have stress without fear, but it's very hard to have fear without stress, okay? We can have stress without trauma, but it's very hard to imagine trauma without a state of stress at some point, okay? Hence PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. And then anxiety occupies this kind of more murky role of anticipation of things in the future, and people can't quite agree on it. But let's treat stress as a physiological response, and then I'd like to learn more about the psychology from our other guest. So first of all, stress is not just in the brain, and therefore neither is fear, trauma, or anxiety. We need to think about the brain, of course, as this contained within our skull, but also our entire nervous system, our spinal cord, and then connections between the organs of the body back to the brain. So the whole nervous system is what generates the stress response. And the simplest way to think about this is some event happens in the outside world. We perceive it. That's the exteroception component. So we see it. Okay, I see the troublesome thing, maybe a text message. These days, a lot of stressors seem to show up in comments and text messages. You see something and it's like, whoa. So what happens? Eyes go wide. So we could dissect this piece by piece, but just to hit a few of the high points of the stress response. Eyelids open. We rarely think about blinking as much of a stress response, but when we are stressed, our eyes go wide because these are shutters on our experience. I'm blinking intentionally now. When we're sleepy, we close our eyes. So eyes go wide, pupils dilate, and literally our perception of the external world changes such that we see certain things better than others and everything else fades away. We get tunnel vision, literally, because of changes in the optics of the eye that we don't have time to go into. But so that's part of the response. So your exteroception itself changes. We go into soda straw or tunnel vision. Now, there's also a signal that's sent. We hear about structures in the brain like the amygdala, so-called fear center, anxiety center, but we also get signals sent from the brain, the hypothalamus, which is basically above the roof of your mouth, down to what's called the sympathetic chain ganglia. It has nothing to do with sympathy for other people. Sympa means together, and basically a row of neurons that goes from about the base of your neck until your navel, dominoes, and releases adrenaline into your body, among other things. And so that all happens within about 500 milliseconds, 1/2 of 1 second. And the important feature of that is that it activates your muscles, it makes you prone to move, and it's biasing you towards movement and action and saying things. Now, some people might say, well, when I get stressed, I freeze. But the freeze response is actually an active response. If I were right now, I'm reasonably calm, I'm alert but calm. But if I were to try and stay completely still, that's actually very hard to do. The freeze response is an active response, as is running away, as is perspiring. So basically, there's a whole cascade of things that get set off. Now, the important thing to understand is that the de-stressed response, the so-called parasympathetic response, is like the opposite side of that seesaw. And that's a very slow response. So the important thing for the audience to understand is that if you feel stressed very quickly and your heart rate is up, there are things that you can do, and we will review those and discuss them. But that response happens very quickly. The expectation should never be that you're not going to get stressed. The expectation and the hope is that we can all use and learn to incorporate tools to adjust that seesaw back the other way. And the seesaw has a kind of asymmetry. It's really happy to go stressed, but it's a little slower or a lot slower to go back down to calm. And we can accelerate that. But I think once we accept that the accelerator on the car is a lot looser, so to speak, than the brake, we realize that we have to slam on the brake, but all we have to do is just barely touch the accelerator and we can feel the stress response. And so some people have a harder time getting into stress, but most everybody has a line at which if some event happened, they are going to experience this, and it happens very fast. So that's just a little bit of the physiology. There are other chemicals besides adrenaline. There's the longer cortisol response that's with chronic stress, et cetera. But to kind of constrain the discussion, just think of it as you have a domino of stress response, and you see something stressful, you should never expect yourself to not get stressed. You should expect yourself to learn how to de-stress faster and faster.
Really interesting. Dr. Lamb, what is the window of tolerance and how does it relate to what we're talking about here?
Yeah. So, when I think about this stress response, I very often, I appreciate that Dr. Huberman talked about this notion that around anxiety, and we've talked about this before, Alex, in some talks around anxiety, that I actually speak to my patients as though anxiety is actually just a stress response in the body. And it gives us this biological place to connect, to be able to say, just like Dr. Huberman is saying, we can learn to regulate this. If my anxiety is just my spinning thoughts, that's a little bit harder to connect to. But one of the terms, and I'm going to stay out of Dr. Huberman's range without going, I have a bachelor's in neuroscience, but it's been a while. So I'm more on the clinical side of things, but the terms allostasis and homeostasis are really important for us to understand when we're talking about a stress response, and that our bodies are always kind of optimally working at a homeostatic level, which is just a steady state where things are optimally functioning. When we get that stress response that Dr. Huberman is talking about, that is inevitable in our lives, it's called an allostatic state. So we're doing things in our bodies to try and come back to homeostasis. But when we get stress response on top of stress response on top of stress response, that allostatic loading can actually increase or change our homeostatic level to where being highly stressed, being at a high cortisol, all of the great neuroscience and biochemistry that Dr. Huberman talks about, that cascade takes off. And if we're there at a really long time, our baseline can actually rise. And so the therapeutic window that we look at really can change of where we're optimally functioning, and our capacity to be able to tolerate stress can change. So people who have had a lot of trauma in their lives, who have been at a high elevated state, that window of tolerance can shift. So that, and it's not just a trauma response. This happens to those of us, we talked about some of this in regard to COVID reentry and our lives post-COVID, that people who have general baseline kind of normal anxiety with added stressors, that allostatic loading increases and all of our symptoms can get worse, or we can be more dysfunctional. That window of our capacity to function gets smaller because we've had this chronic hit. I know, Dr. Huberman, I think I saw that you had talked with Dr. Zapolsky, Robert Zapolsky, about this. He has a great book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And the notion that our bodies are set for stress to go up, come down, and that resilience really requires some downtime to be able to re-regulate and reach that, come back to that homeostatic state. And if we don't, if we have chronic stress, that everything can go off, kind of offline, as we've got those catecholamines and the cortisol and all of the stress hormones constantly flooding us. It can change things in our bodies, and this is where dysfunction really can happen.
Dr. Human, you mentioned earlier that we can get into some strategies to manage this stress effectively and also improve our own resilience. What are your go-to strategies?
Yeah, so a lot of what my laboratory is involved in, and when I say my laboratory, I should say that the work I'm about to describe is in collaboration with a colleague of mine who's our Associate Chair of Psychiatry, David Spiegel. He's an MD. His lab is well known for using clinical hypnosis for the treatment of various anxiety disorders.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and hypnosis has some interesting relevance to what we're talking about today, but that's his expertise. So maybe discussion for another time. But we have a project where we've now run hundreds of subjects remotely during this last year, but also brought people into the laboratory to explore how respiration, breathing, and vision can be used in order to shift one's internal state. And the way I like to think about stress management from a physiological perspective, because that's my training, is that first of all, breathing is a powerful bridge between conscious and subconscious processing. So we breathe all the time, but we can also immediately take control of our breathing, right? There aren't a lot of other things in our body like that. For instance, our heart rate is going on continually, but I can't actively control my heart rate immediately. I can't make it beat half as quickly just by deciding, but we can do that with our breathing. So it's a nice bridge in the brainstem between our conscious and subconscious processes. And of course, how we feel and how stressed we are and how relaxed we are impacts our breathing, but the reverse is also true. How we breathe impacts our internal state. So there's a lot of discussion nowadays about meditation and breath work, et cetera, but there's one particular, what I call real-time tool that a number of people have found valuable and that we've got a lot of good science now to support, which is called the physiological sigh. Now, we all do these in sleep subconsciously. An animal will do this before it goes down for a nap. If you watch a dog, it's 2 inhales through the nose, followed by an extended exhale through the mouth. And the second inhale through the nose only allows you to sneak in a tiny bit of air. So I'll demonstrate what this looks like. It's so it's a big inhale through the nose, then sneaking a tiny bit more air in through the nose before a long exhale through the mouth. Now, even for people that have a deviated septum or some obstruction through the nose, that's the proper way to do it. Now, physiological sighs happen spontaneously in sleep anytime a gas in our system called carbon dioxide builds up too high. And actually, carbon dioxide is the stimulus to breathe, not the desire for oxygen. It's just a consequence that when we inhale, we bring in oxygen. When we exhale, we offload carbon dioxide. So simple way to put this is if anyone gets too stressed, young or old, provided you're not underwater, you can use the physiological sigh to quickly de-stress. So it's a big inhale, another little inhale through the nose, and a long exhale through the mouth. When in our laboratory and in the natural world, we observe that this is the fastest way to de-stress oneself or to take control of that internal state. You might need to repeat it 2 or 3 times, and just know that your heart rate takes a bit longer to come down. But to our knowledge, this is the equivalent of hitting the brake on stress. Now that's one approach.
Can I overuse it?
Yes, there is one way that you can overuse it. If you were to do 10 what we call cyclic physiological sighs, if you were to sit there and go inhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, inhale, exhale, and to do that repeatedly 10 or 15 times, you would get very sleepy. You would actually send your system.
That might sound great.
A lot of people use this to fall back asleep when they've woken up in the middle of the night, although there are other approaches as well. The long exhale emphasized breathing, as we say, is quite powerful for de-stressing. A lot of people say, take a deep breath when you're stressed. That actually sends your system in the wrong direction. That I'll just explain. There's a very beautiful relationship between breathing and heart rate that is not mystical. It's entirely physiological, and it goes the following way. When you inhale through the nose or through the mouth, your diaphragm, which is this muscle inside your body, moves down, okay? As a consequence, your heart gets a little bit bigger, literally. Blood flows a little bit slower through that larger volume, and a signal is sent to the brain that your heart rate the blood flow is slowing down. So the brain sends a signal back to the heart to speed the heart up. In other words, when you inhale, you speed your heart up.
Yes.
Conversely, when you exhale, the diaphragm moves up, your heart gets a little smaller in the physical sense, and blood flows more quickly through that smaller volume. A signal is sent to the brain about that. A signal is sent back from the brain to slow the heart down. So exhale, slow your heart down. Now, of course, you have to inhale sooner or later, but this is something that in physician circles, they know as respiratory sinus arrhythmia. But what it really is when you inhale, you speed your heart up. When you exhale, you slow your heart down. The double inhale followed by an exhale, the physiological size, serves a very particular role. Your lungs are not just two big sacs of air. They actually have millions of little sacs called alveoli, like little tiny balloons. And when you get stressed, those balloons collapse. They flatten out. And then when you exhale, you can't get rid of that carbon dioxide and you feel like you're getting asphyxiated. If you've ever done public speaking, if your voice is going higher and higher and you feel like you're being choked, that's because you're not offloading carbon dioxide. So when you do the double inhale, you reinflate those little balloons, those alveoli of the lungs. And that allows you to offload or remove the maximal amount of carbon dioxide when you exhale. So put simply, double inhale followed by an exhale, repeated 2 or 3 times, will take your level of calm up and will bring your level of stress down very, very quickly. And like I said, unless you're underwater, there's no reason to not incorporate this.
Hey, really fabulous. And I've noticed that when I've lain in bed and I go, all right, I got to take a deep breath, and I take a deep breath and I feel my heart rate go up and I go, wait a minute, what's wrong with my body? I thought I was supposed to calm down. And then I notice on the exhale, that's when I experience that calm. Dr. Lamb, I am going to get back to you, but I want to stay with Dr. Huberman real quick on increasing oxytocin and if this is an antidote for cortisol.
Well, it's interesting. Yes, and oxytocin has received a lot of attention because of the many incredible things it does. Social contact, not just physical contact, but social contact, is known to increase oxytocin. A familiar smell, in particular, somebody that you like, or is a caretaker, or that you take care of. I mean, it actually occurs even between humans and animals. So it's basically a chemical signature of bond, a chemical signature, not necessarily of safety, but familiarity. And oxytocin has relationship both to the serotonin system, a neuromodulator chemical. When we say neuromodulator, we say neuromodulator, not neurotransmitter, because neuromodulators are beautiful because they're sort of like playlists. They establish a whole set of activities in the brain. You can think of serotonin as like one playlist. I don't want to throw out music because I'll date myself and then I'll isolate certain members of the audience. I'll isolate myself from certain members of the audience. But imagine that it's certain genres of music. Oxytocin is woven in tightly with the serotonin system, which is really a system that's designed to generate a sense of well-being and reward from what we have in our immediate experience. The food we are already eating, the person that we are in contact with by text or by phone or FaceTime or in real person, right? Whereas oxytocin is also tethered to the dopamine system. And the dopamine system is really a system of reward for things that we are seeking or that are outside our immediate experience. Tell kids you're going to get ice cream, and it's all about the trip to go get this thing that's outside their immediate experience. Holding your child or your loved one and really basking in just how fortunate you are, or they are, or the circumstances are, what a wonderful evening or day it is, that's the serotonin system. And I'm using a broad brush here, but oxytocin is basically involved in both of those. And when we are stressed, we tend to seek out these neurochemicals, but we don't consciously realize we're doing that. We are seeking out contact. I mean, if you've ever landed or you're about to take off on a plane, everyone's texting like crazy. That's pre-flight anxiety. That's really what that is. And they're trying to get that connection to feel comfortable. Some people more than others. Other people, unfortunately, self-medicate before flying. People do all sorts of things to try and adjust themselves. But oxytocin is nature's natural and most powerful way to allow us a sense of calm from an external source. I think that's important to understand. However, gratitude, it's known, can evoke oxytocin release. These are the people that maybe have their eyes closed before the flight. Maybe we think they're really stressed, but actually they're thinking about how much how great the trip they just had was, or just how excited they are to go see somebody. So we can remember, these chemicals are all locked in here. Nobody comes along and gives you a little bit of oxytocin. It's all internal.
Dr. Huberman, we are at the end of our time here, and I'm going to end with you on one question. And Dr. Lamb, are you able to stick around and answer a few more questions?
Absolutely. Sure.
Okay, awesome. So Dr. Huberman, you have hundreds, if not thousands of hours of fabulous content all out on the internet, on YouTube and other places. Independent of this is related to resilience, what is the number one coolest thing that you know that when you tell people, they're just blown away? They go, what? That's true? What is that thing?
Okay, I have to pick two.
Okay, that's fair.
I'll keep the first one brief. The first one is that these two little bits that we call eyes are actually two pieces of our brain, our central nervous system. They are the only two pieces of our central nervous system, our brain, that is outside the cranial vault, the skull. I mean, technically they're in the skull, but they're outside the cranial vault. And the reason they are there is because we need information about the external world in terms of time of day. So that information comes in by viewing sunlight. Viewing sunlight in the morning is, I would argue, is one of the most important mental health and physical health promoting practices that one could possibly incorporate. You just get outside, even on a cloudy day, for 2 to 10 minutes. Get outside, sunglasses off if you can do it safely. Eyeglasses and contacts are fine. You don't have to look directly at the sun. Even on a cloudy day in England, in winter, you're getting more photons, light energy, to specialized neurons in your eyes that then establish that baseline of alertness early in the day and allow you to fall asleep more easily at night. Think of that practice that I just described as your brain figuring out where you are in time. The way it only knows because of where the sun is, and seeing the sun, and when the sun is up and sun is down. There's more to this, but also think about that practice as adjusting the tightness of that hinge on the stress calm ability that we talked about before. That'll be the first thing. And the second one I will indeed keep very short, which is this concept of neuroplasticity. The beauty of the human nervous system, not just the brain, but the entire nervous system, is that it can rewire itself, so-called neuroplasticity. It can change its connections in response to experience. There are dedicated ways to do that we could talk about, but in the future perhaps, when there's more time. But that is an amazing capacity. No other organ of the body can tell itself, hey, I want to learn conversational French. I want to learn to self-regulate my calm. I want to become more gritty and resilient. But this organ can do that. And that's incredible. It is a customized map of your prior experience. But the beauty of neuroplasticity is that you can also customize that organ for your present and your future experience. It takes some work, but it is well worth that work. So forgive me for selecting two when you said one, but.
Oh yeah, shame on you. Really fabulous. Love all of that. Is there anything that we did not talk about today, Dr. Huberman, that you'd like to talk about now?
Well, at risk of taking up too much of everybody's time, I think I'll stop there. I just want to say thank you to you both. I very much appreciate what you're doing for the world. I think that a merge of physiology and psychology and the other aspects of health practices that people have, spiritual, familial, relational, emotional, all of that is needed. And I suppose I would like to say that I have a physiological perspective, but that I have great respect for the other perspectives. And I do think that as humans, we need to incorporate all those perspectives. And the real key is to just jump in and start applying the tools and to expand one's awareness of what you need. And so it's kind of a buffet of things that one can do. So thanks to you and the amazing work that you're doing. People need information and you're providing.
Well, thanks for coming on and providing even more, Dr. Huberman, and hopefully we can have you back with even more time, because your insight was truly, I mean, I wasn't on camera the whole time, but I'm going, yeah, it was fabulous. Remember, you can check out Dr. Huberman's podcast using the links below this video. Dr. Lamb is with us still. Thank you for continuing to chat with us, Dr. Lamb. I want to move into more tips to build resilience, specifically how people can enhance their cognitive flexibility. First of all, what is that? And then how do we do it?
Yeah, so cognitive flexibility is when we allow ourselves, we may have talked about this concept before, to be able to see what we're doing, how we're thinking about something, and then being able to observe it and be flexible with what's coming up. So the thoughts that often come up in the midst of a stressful situation, we're talking about resilience here in the midst of difficult times, challenges. Some of us will immediately get anxious and start to go to catastrophization. We might personalize the situation and say, this always happens to me, or that it's going to be permanent, and we kind of lose a sense of hope. When we can notice those negative thoughts, right, we can build a little bit of space to separate from it and then potentially rework the thoughts that are coming up. In therapy sessions, I'll often ask, could that be a depressive thought? Could that be a hopeless thought? And can we just identify it for what it is so that we can get clear how this might be functioning as I'm in this anxious state, and that this could just be a mechanism that we can then intervene and come up with the alternative. I might be able to tell myself in one of those stressful states, this isn't going to last forever. I've got this, right? You got this, right? We might be able to let ourselves know this isn't just about me. This isn't because I'm just broken in some way. Mm-hmm. And this is where observing with that compassionate attunement can really make a difference. But first and foremost, we have to notice that we're doing it. So the first step in this process is noticing, oh, I'm in that place where I'm attacking myself, where I'm making this worse than it might otherwise be. And so noticing first, and then having sometimes it's just a simple mantra that we keep in the back of our in the back of our minds, that when we're in a stressful situation that we can call upon. So with Med Circle, right, it's you got this. Even just hearing the echoes of Kyle saying that, we can keep that in our back pocket when we're stressed and think, okay, you got this, right? Yeah. And I've seen that, my daughter was just learning how to swim, and I had her in the pool saying like, what's your name? I'm Zadie. And I was like, what was the mantra was, watch me, right? To build her up, to help her feel a sense of resilience and grit, to say, even though she was afraid to do this, she was going, watch me. She's 4. And so it's pretty, we're laughing hysterically, but these internal mantras, as opposed to what she went into the water saying is, I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to do it. Today's not the day. Right. And so we reprocessed and tried to create some flexibility around those cognitions, around those thoughts, and instituted a mantra that could then otherwise change things.
Really beautiful. Fabulous. Love that. And a lot of what you were saying reminds me of some of the takeaways I have gotten from shooting and filming the series on acceptance and commitment therapy. We have 2 YouTube videos that I want to refer to right now. One is how to overcome anxiety, improve resilience using acceptance and commitment therapy. We'll link to it somewhere on top of the screen. And then the other one is a mock therapy session using acceptance and commitment therapy. And you'll really see the relationship you have with your thoughts illustrated in that therapy session. So if what Dr. Lamb said just resonated with you, definitely check out 1, 2, or both of those videos that we'll link to. Dr. Lamb, let's, excuse me, let's talk about your final thoughts when it comes to resilience, especially as a parent and a psychiatrist. How do we develop that resilience in our children?
So I think that, as we talked about from the very beginning of this talk, that grit is one thing that we can help train our children in, right? We can help them learn how to speak to themselves, how to engage. We can encourage them to stay in the moment, to push through. But as you've heard me say always, right, our work is not to just always push through. We need to also teach our children how to relax and how to come back down from that allostatic loading of stress responses, and be able to take a breath and to be able to attune to ourselves, to be able to notice, do I have the capacity and the bandwidth to push through right now? Is this the right time to push through? And I would suggest that the kids who are really resilient have ways to decompress. They have ways to know and how to say, this isn't the time to push through. I don't have to be scoring every goal and being the first person at the end of the finish line during practice, because I need to save myself for games. There's a great book by Carol Dweck called Mindset that I would suggest to any parent that talks a lot about the sense of building a growth mentality. That means I'm working on these processes, these internal capacities that then cultivate an overall sense of resilience.
Really well said. I will put my brother up for examination without his blessing in front of you, Dr. Lamb. He has a 4-year-old who I just adore. And he has taught him, or trains him, however you want to put it, that when he's struggling, whether it's to build a Lego castle or, do anything, that he tells himself, I can do this. I can do this. So if he's struggling to build this castle, and he's just like, oh, it's fallen down 3 times. My brother will say, and what do we tell ourselves when we're trying to do something or accomplish something? And then my nephew will say, I can do this. I can do this. Ironically, now when I'm in the gym and my trainer's telling me to do extra stuff, I say that out loud. I go, I can do this. I can do this. So what do you think? Is that an okay parenting?
It's beautiful. Technique? No, I mean, beautiful. This is, you've got this. This is watch me, right? This is now our family joke, right? It's like when my daughter's going to my older daughter is going to have a test, we're like, watch me, for spelling test,
I love that. I just got
right.
chills.
So and it is something we have to cultivate, that our minds are wired to look out for threat, to catastrophize, or to see the negative so that we can survive, right? That back in the day when we were watching out for lions and tigers and bears, we needed to be not thinking everything's going to be great at all times. We needed to be vigilant, and at times hyper vigilant. And so it's something we actually have to cultivate and train ourselves to do. And so helping children see when their mind is going more towards something negative or a negative pattern of thinking, and giving them and offering them an alternative, I think is beautiful. So yes, kudos to your brother. And to you for creating you got this for the community here.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lamb. Always great seeing you. I could listen to you speak almost about anything, I think, forever, but especially when it comes to anxiety and stress and resilience. So I appreciate your insight as always.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
And as for you, our incredible viewer, I'm glad that you clicked on this video and you made it all the way to the end. If you haven't subscribed, please do. We're pretty close to 1 million subs. Maybe by the time you're watching this, we're at 1 million subscribers. But most importantly, as we mentioned, remember, whatever you're going through, you got this.
Thanks for watching. Check out the links below for more information on how to access this full series, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch new mental health videos every week. Did you like what you heard in this video? If you want to ask a MedCircle doctor a question directly, you can learn how by visiting the links in the description below.